Hey everybody, it's Keith with the L1 Automotive Training Channel, and big update. EPA's released some guidance information, and it is super, super revealing, as well as I was partially wrong. I said I didn't do anything. I also spoke and said CARB a whole lot instead of Clean Air Act. What was all the other? I got hundreds of comments of how I'm an idiot, and that's fine. I, barely graduated high school, but here I am reading paperwork to you on the internet while you're watching this video. So let me show you what got released. So this was released today. I'm going to put a link to the actual document. You can download it directly from the EPA.gov's website. There was actually a ton of stuff released today. I may grab the one that they responded to SEMA as well, because SEMA had requested back in June, which is last month now as of yesterday, like a week and a half ago, they requested some documentation, and then this Freedom to Fix thing came out. So this has been something that's been in the works in the background. So this is the EPA's support for Freedom to Fix clarification for manufacturers. So this was released today, a couple hours ago, and sent to vehicle manufacturers. And again, I got to be super clear here. Nothing in this there's no new laws, no new things released, but it is clarification for what we've already had availability to. But there are some super interesting pieces in this that I found I was surprised by. And you're going to be like, oh, you should have known, but I honestly didn't. So, big one. Purpose letter to affirm the U.S. EPA's commitment to further the freedom to fix, blah, blah, blah. EPA acknowledges the positive, proactive way in which manufacturers have worked in collaboration and not just satisfy EPA regulations, but to do so in a way that facilitates resolutions of issues with all parties. And they go on to give an example of the collaboration of the National Automotive Service Task Force, NASTF, a not-for-profit organization established to facilitate the identification and correction of gaps in the availability and accessibility of automotive service information, service training, diagnostic tools, equipment, and communications. NASTF helps ensure an equal playing field for all automotive service professionals. NASTF is a cooperative effort among the automotive service industry and the equipment tool industry, automobile original equipment manufacturers, and there's no cost to participate in NASTF, which is open to professional automotive service technicians, shop owners, service writers, OEM service employees, and other industry professionals. Should have said professionals. Now, this is kind of interesting because I'm the treasurer and secretary of NASTF, and this is kind of out of left field for me. Didn't know this was coming. We regularly communicate with EPA. We facilitate service information and tool information requests. So if you're not familiar with what NASTF does, if you go purchase access to a factory scan tool, let's say you go to General Motors' website, you purchase a subscription to Service Programming System 2, which is $52 for a single car, and you use a J-Box, which I typically have one laying around. This is kind of one, kind of not. It's an Autel interface. You can plug that interface into a laptop, download Service Programming System for $52, and have the ability to reprogram modules back to OEM. It's only OEM programming, OEM tools, scan tools. We can get a GDS2 subscription, Ford. All the brands out there have that. Now, let's say I do that with GM and I have a problem. I call GM's help desk up, and let's say that it's a Monday problem or a Friday problem, and I get the B team, and they're not helpful. Or I think that I should have more access than what they give me. I can go to NASTF's website, nastf.org, and file a tool information request. Or let's say I go on and buy a $20 subscription to service information and get wiring diagrams for a brand new, let's say I just bought like a Cadillac Lyric or something, and I couldn't find a wiring diagram for something, or I wanted to fix it myself. And I pay the $22 for the service information for 3 days access. I download the same wiring diagrams, have access to all the same information the dealers have for a short-term fee. By the way, that's how it is across the board for all the manufacturers. Pretty much all of them. Please don't make a big fuss out of the one manufacturer, the 4 or 5 manufacturers that don't really comply. All the big guys have this access. So let's say I have a problem. I can go to NASTF's website and file a service information request or a tool information request if that manufacturer doesn't help me. And then NASTF will connect with that liaison of that brand. So for instance, if you go look, this is open public knowledge. If you go look at NASTF's board, our chair is Bob Stewart, who works for General Motors. He's the director of aftermarket support and care, as well as brand protection for General Motors. So let's say I call the help desk and they're less than helpful or they can't find it or whatever, I go to NASTF, I file a service information request or tool information request. Donnie gets it and he calls Bob up and goes, Bob, there's no diagram for this lyric. He'll look and go, holy cow, you're right, there's no diagram. Well, with GM, it's a bad example because their system is the same as what they share with the aftermarket. So it would be the dealers didn't have that either. So maybe we find, and there's actually been some examples of that. One with Toyota that was interesting, where an aftermarket technician found some missing information that even the dealers didn't have access to because the Toyota system is also mirrored to the aftermarket. Anyways, back to this. I thought it was cool. They pointed out NASTF as an example of a great collaboration between OEMs and the aftermarket. Something that if you paid attention to some of the recent right to repair stuff that happened out there, there are some people that are pushing right to repair that said this isn't happening. So you could even conflate that as some, I think because it was testimony, you could call that perjury. But, you know, there are those if you know kind of thing out there. Anyways, moving on. Fun stuff. As explained in greater detail, the Clean Air Act and EPA regulation expressly state no action shall be treated as prohibited if the action is for the purpose of repair of the vehicle and is returned to its proper function when the repair is complete. This is big. This part is really important because it clarifies again, just like I said, you cannot delete a vehicle's emissions component and say it's a repair because you have to put it back to original configuration. Now, there is some more stuff in here to clarify that. So if we go down and look, there is an addition, regulation, I apologize. There's like 3 pages of this. I don't want to just read all to you. I want to hit the highlights and kind of call out something that is interesting in here. It says that the Clean Air Act anticipates that it may be necessary to disable an element of the emissions control system to effectuate a repair. And it's clear that action is not a prohibited act when it's for the purpose of repair, and such action thereafter results in the proper functioning of the device. What this means, and this was what's going to happen. You're going to see that line get ran with by every delete shop out there and go, see, we can delete it because it's purpose of repair because I couldn't get the part or whatever. And that last section, that is such action thereof results in the proper functioning of the device. It goes on to clarify again, and I'll point it out later. That is very important. That the reason why they're saying that it's not, that it may be necessary to disable that is because if I have to get to the oil pan on a Honda Civic to replace the gasket, I have to remove the catalytic converter to get access to the oil pan. If I do that, I'm technically removing an emissions compliance device. They are recognizing that I may have to temporarily remove one, but then I have to result in proper functioning of the device when I get done. The law is ridiculous, and the way everything is written is ridiculous. I spent 4 years through both failed attempts at college in constitutional and criminal law, and the law is stupid. And it's got everything has to be so clear. If it says it's illegal to remove an emissions compliance device, technically pulling it off to fix an oil pan gasket is illegal even if you put it back on. So they have to put that in there. That yes, it's completely they recognize it may be necessary to disable an element for testing or to effectuate in a repair. So if we go a little farther to clarify, because someone's going to be like, well, that's not what it means. Well, whatever. What's neat is they talk about, goes further to protect consumers, providing manufacturers cannot suggest that it's necessary to use their own branded parts. Again, that is further constituting what's in the Magnuson-Moss Act, which I don't remember if it's actually called out in here or not, but I bet it is. Conditions warranty 6.7. If we look down here, 6.7, no, sorry, 6.7. Sorry, I got teenagers. So that's in there. That's important that it calls out. You can use whatever brand of parts you want, and they can't mess with your warranty. That's been a federal law since the 70s under the Magnuson-Moss Act, Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act. You're welcome to look at that. You can use equivalent generic parts, blah, 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 blah. Here's another one. Additionally, EPA implementation regulations state that individuals may repair the engine or equipment if it's restored to proper functioning when the repair is complete, or may modify an engine or equipment to respond to a temporary emergency as long as it's restored to proper functioning as soon as possible. So here is some gray area for you. When is as soon as possible? What is an emergency? All I'm telling you is that intent is going to matter when they talk about the law. So if you go, hey, I'm going to delete this diesel and I'm going to say it was an emergency and that's why I spent $4,000 having someone delete this component off and do that because the part's $9,000, guess what? Good luck holding that up in court because it's very, very clear that you've got to return to its certified configuration before being returned to service. This means use one or more procedures that temporarily take a product out of its certified configuration, perform maintenance or repair, are not prohibited acts, provided it's returned to original service. Okay? I'm telling you over and over and over again, all the guys are like, I get to delete it now. And I know you're tired of me harping on this. This is all that I've gotten is hate mail from every single diesel delete guy out there. I've got customers calling the shop because programming is in our name. And so they assume we do aftermarket programming. We typically field 1 to 5 calls a week that's like, hey, do you guys do programming, tunes, deletes? We have to constantly remind people, no, that's a federal crime. We're not interested in doing that. We got 60-something cars here to fix under their original configuration. It has quadrupled in the amount of requests. It's absolutely crazy. And I have to educate people. And I try, and then they argue with me. And I tell them, that's fine. You go delete your car. I don't have nothing to do with it. I think it's a crime. I disagree. Whatever. Whether I think we should delete cars or not, because truth be told, I think you should be able to cut it off and do whatever to some degree. I don't want to be like China or India. I don't know if you guys have ever been to India, but you can't see. There's so much smog, it's crazy. China, same thing. I've never been to China, but China's crazy. Like the smog, we have to have some kind of control here. Not government control. I'm also Native American. So I'm from the government and I'm here to help is the scariest crap I've ever heard in my life. Anyways, try not to get political, but I think there needs to be some kind of like, don't do X, don't do Y, but I do enjoy the Wild West part of America as well. So whatever. Anyways, my opinion doesn't matter. The current law is written the way it is. And I don't feel like breaking the law I don't feel like breaking this law. Take that for whatever you want it to be. Anyways, so let's look at the rest of this. Use of emissions control, diagnostic system. So this is what's interesting. The EPA regulations require manufacturers to make full text emissions related service information and training available via the World Wide Web. So with that being said, let me show you something. Let's go to motorcraftservice.com. I'm not logged in to my account. We're just going to go free resources, OBD2 theory and operation. I just bought a 25 Expedition, find my vehicle, or I can put a VIN in. And then here we go, emissions summary for gasoline, OBD operation summary. We have 174 pages, the PCED pinpoint test and manual of how everything in the emissions system functions, all of it. Every single portion that would be needed to diagnose, including transmission data, by the way, for the 8F24 front-wheel drive cars. Here is the entire solenoid chart or shift chart for solenoid to control for what transmission state they're in, the final drive gear ratios. This is all transmission stuff here at the end. But if we look up here, we get even, let's see, where was that at? This is the threshold data for, response rate malfunction threshold. So this is everything. This is 174 pages of the emissions compliance OBD2 standard. Ford has been in compliance of this forever. It is publicly available for $393. For those that are having trouble, that's free. Not there's not an actual number there. I apologize for my terrible dad jokes. So back to this. Provide equipment tool companies with information that allows them to develop equipment with pass-through programming capabilities. That already happens. Every one of these is already happening, and they're already a thing. There's none of this that's new. They already do all of this. Some manufacturers follow this better than others. I'll tell you that. Ongoing responsibility. Contains documents don't have the force and effect law, are not meant to bind the EPA manufacturers in any way, blah, 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 blah. Signed, and that's from today. Now, the other thing that was kind of interesting, and now I've lost it on my screen, so I don't know where it went. But if we go to EPA.gov, you can go there yourself, go down here to the See All Releases, and they sent something to SEMA. So they have this release. They have a letter they sent to SEMA. And this says, let me make this readable. They sent it to Mike. So they're responding to their letter from April, not June, my bad. They recognize industry's interest in providing a pathway to demonstrate compliance, and they're talking about other than CARB, like they spoke about. Remember, they said specifically that in the Freedom to Fix memo that Trump signed, that they want to have a path other than CARB to have emissions compliance components. So they did that. They actually responded to SEMA, and they said, and again, this was today. They did this today, that the EPA's tampering policy identifies several compliance pathways for aftermarket manufacturers, and including the type of emissions testing described in SEMA certified emissions program materials. The tampering policy explains how a person may demonstrate. The materials has shared. The EPA describes how SEMA designed the SCE program to meet the policy's exact requirements, and they agree that as described, the emissions testing performed through SEMA's SCE satisfies that policy criteria, which means there is a plethora of aftermarket parts out there that could be used. So if we go to SEMA SC-E program and we go to the SEMA Garage website, and we can see here, we can actually search their database, and let's say we find, what's something I bought recently? I bought some Turbonetic stuff for an EcoBoost. Yeah, look at that. That's funny. It's a SC certification, but I think this one had a CARB number 2. Let me look. Yeah. See, if we look, this is their certification of compliance, and they actually have, you can't see that, I zoomed in too much. It actually gives it a CARB number 2, but some stuff complies without a CARB number. So let's go some other random company. I don't know if any of these have CARB numbers or not. What is this? Oh, I don't know what this one is. Voluntary labeling. See, no CARB number. And this is for a 15 Silverado 2500. And if you go down and look, it meet the NMHC, CO, particulate matter, and NOx, all those, according to this summary of tests performed, that it complies with the emissions standard. And that means that this speed of air engine technologies component, whatever this is, pistons, piston ring, pins, retainer clips, are certified to be used by the SCE. So you can use these components, and they're certified to be within emissions compliance, and they're not CARB certified. So again, it's not like any of this stuff is new, but it was nice that they agreed with SEMA that, hey, their system is in compliance, at least as it's currently described in their letter. So we're seeing some movement. That's where I was mostly wrong, is where you see that there is some change because of this. We're getting more, definitely seeing more traction in the conversation. And then also, God, I thought I would never say this in my life. Thank you to the EPA for the little call out to NASTF about our collaboration. We do a lot of work. All the SIR, TIR programs are all free. The noise you hear about NASTF when it comes to the paid system is the secure data release model for immobilizer data. And NASTF, we're not for profit. So, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I don't want to start that conversation. I get nothing but hate over it. I don't care. Enjoy. Hope you learned something today. And no, you can't delete your diesel. I'm out.